Hello everyone, my name is Sierra Ziegler. I wanted to introduce you to my new YouTube page. This YouTube page is kind of going to revolve around wellness, heart health, what I do every day as a heart attack survivor, and all sorts of different videos. So I really just want to be an advocate for anyone that is younger, a woman, anyone going through any sort of illnesses, and kind of just show you how I do my everyday things being in the position I'm in. So to introduce myself, I'm Sierra Ziegler and I am 23 years old and I'm currently living in Pennsylvania. I am working in HR as well as doing medical scribing. This year I was also chosen as a survivor for the Go Red for Women, Real Women of 2023. So that's also been a huge part of my life this year. So it encouraged me to start doing videos because I realized that there aren't many people speaking about their conditions and their everyday life looks like. So I just want to help encourage people to just keep moving forward no matter what your condition is. So I wanted to start to talk about my heart attack. So I had a heart attack when I was 14 years old. Before anyone makes any sort of comments, this happened in 2014. So this has nothing to do with COVID, nothing to do with the COVID vaccine, none of the above. I wanted to start going into the story a little bit of how this all came about. So when I was 14, I had no other health conditions that I had known of. It all started the night of a school dance. We went to the dance. The dance was so fun. I had my first dance with a boy, and my heart was thumping pretty heavily when I had gotten home. It was racing and thumping hard, but I didn't think anything of it because I was kind of connecting having my first dance with a boy with these heart symptoms. Come to find out then, it wasn't what it had seemed. So the next morning I woke up and I, grabbed my favorite shirt. I still remember exactly what it looks like. It was a pink and gray long sleeve. It was winter time. And I went and tried to put it on and I realized I couldn't put it on. I felt as if I didn't have the energy to put it on. That was my first symptoms. So I walked down the hallway to my parents' room, then across the house. And when I started walking there, I felt my ears getting warm. And then my vision slowly started to get blurry. At that point, I was on the floor. I wasn't sure what was going on. My sister was in my parents' bathroom and she had just started to walk out and she said, "Get up, what are you doing?" If you know me, I am dramatic. And if you don't know me, now you know I'm dramatic. So she steps over me, walks somewhere else, that she's no longer with me. And my parents were downstairs. Everyone else was downstairs. So my only hope was my sister. So I mustered up enough to say, "Mom." At that point, I was still laying on the ground. And so I got Mom out. Somehow my mom heard me all the way across the house downstairs. So she meets me at the bottom of the steps. I think I was able to get up and get myself moving a little bit. And she asked me what's going on, and I don't know the exact conversation that had happened, but I know my parents were talking back and forth of, do we need an ambulance? Do we really need to go? What's going on? Should we go to the hospital? All sorts of questions were kind of being said right then and there. My dad made the final say, and he said, "We need to get her to a hospital right now," because he could tell my color was going and it was green. So he's a pharmacist, so he has some idea that, a green skin color is not indication of something good. So he got us to a hospital within 10 minutes and it was a 20-minute drive it was supposed to be. So Dad moved quick on the situation. So we get to the hospital. They're asking me a ton of questions right when I get there. And I just remember slumping back like this. And I wasn't able to really breathe much. Everything just felt so heavy on me. And I couldn't describe the feeling that I was feeling. And at that point, my arms were starting to hurt me. So they bring us back to a room. We had a bunch of testing done that the doctor had ordered. And from what I had talked to my mom about just like a week or two ago, she said they had run an EKG on me. And what that EKG showed was that it was an abnormal result. So with that being said, I think the doctor ended up running troponin levels, which allows you to see if something is going on with the heart, such as like a heart attack. Anyway, the doctor ended up not being able to give me a true diagnosis at that point because he couldn't really figure out what was going on. Of course, none of my labs had come back. It was just a few hours after they were done, if that. So he told me I had teenage anxiety. And at that point, I was really, really hurt because I felt like I had just wasted the whole morning of my brother's birthday. And it felt like I was being selfish, and I was embarrassed that they had told me that. I mean, teenage anxiety was the best case scenario, but that wasn't the case. So the doctor didn't feel 100% about his diagnosis. And at that point, I was still in insane pain. I had pain from my elbow all the way up to my shoulder on both arms. And my mom just had to keep rubbing it and rubbing it and rubbing it to give me any sort of relief. It just felt like I was internally aching, and it felt like I was having a hard time breathing. So it kind of felt like something was sitting on top of my chest. So the doctor said, let's send her to AI DuPont, which was a local children's hospital. It was about a 30-minute drive then from there. So they took me in an ambulance, no sirens on. It was kind of just a chill ride. We get to the hospital, and from what my mom had said, they were kind of putting us on the back burner in a sense of like, what is she doing here? She looks fine. You know, what's going on? So after hours of testing, we are sitting in a triage room. It was very uncomfortable. It was still all of my family at that point. So we started the day at 8 in the morning, and it was probably afternoon, early evening. And so after waiting for hours, they finally get us our own room, and it was literally like a hotel room. It was very nice. Finally, we had our own privacy. And within a short amount of time, the doctors had come in and told me that I needed surgery. At that point, I was in the dark, and then I was still in the dark going into surgery, but I was kind of glad that they had found something because at that point I didn't feel crazy for what I was feeling. So I felt validated. But being 14, you really don't have a voice, and you can't really explain what's going on for something you don't really understand. Going into the surgery, I had no idea what kind of surgery they were going to do. I didn't know what was going on. I'm sure they kind of briefly told me what was going on, but kind of just blew my mind. I was 14, so I didn't quite understand what was going on. So they brought me back to the operation room. I've never had a surgery before this, never had any other health issues. They brought me back to the operation room, and I remember them asking me what kind of anesthesia I want, and I told them cotton candy, and they gave me that. And I just remember laying on a warm bed and then putting the little mask on me, and then it was done by then. So I woke up, and my sister was sitting in the corner of the room, and she was crying. And if you've ever had a sister, you know something bad must be going on if they're crying for you. I asked her why she was crying. I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "You had a heart attack." And I said, "What?" She said, "You had a heart attack." And at that point, all I knew was there was a sandbag on my leg, nothing else besides that. And I just said, no, I didn't. What are you talking about? She brings my parents in, and they confirmed that I for sure had a heart attack. And they had explained to me what happened, but, you know, my first thought was, why did this happen to me? I didn't know kids had heart attacks. I've never heard of this before, and neither did anyone else around me. What happened with my heart attack was I had a hole in my heart, which was a congenital heart defect, also called an ASD. They found that I had a blood clotting disorder. This disorder, it doesn't have a specific name besides being elevated lipoprotein A, which is a protein of your red blood cells, and the levels were elevated. So it made my red blood cells extra sticky. My red blood cells had come together and created this clot. And this clot was somewhere in my body, and I must have danced it into my heart, into that hole. And within that hole, it was able to get to my coronary artery, which it then got lodged in my coronary artery. So during that open heart surgery, they knew I was having a heart attack from a blockage somewhere, but they didn't know why or how. So they found that through a cardiac cath, they went up through my groin. They found that I had a clot in my coronary artery. So while they were in there, they used a little mesh piece. It was very, very teeny tiny, and they closed that hole in my heart. They didn't take the clot out or anything. They ended up putting me on heavy blood thinners to get that blood clot away. Just like any other heart patient, I was in the hospital for quite some time, a little longer than most heart attack patients. I think I was in the hospital for about 2.5 weeks. So that was a hard time for me because it was during finals of school. It was my very first finals, and I felt like I was missing out on them, which now looking back on it, it was kind of a blessing in disguise because I was freaking out already from them. I was very academically involved, so it was hard for me to miss that much school and miss that big of a thing. Transitioning from the hospital to home, it was very weird. My parents were being extra cautious with me, like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And it was very hard for me to put that through my head that I had restrictions. So I did have restrictions then after my heart attack. I had to be careful with stairs. I had to be careful with the amount of weight I could carry. I think it was a 25-pound limit, which I didn't understand at the time why. I just had people acting like I was a porcelain doll, which was very weird. Being a middle child, I didn't have all the attention on me, so it felt like all the attention was on me at that point. Going back to school was also strange for me as well because I could only do half days. So I went from being at school every single day to only being able to do half days only, and that's how I transitioned back into school. I was on lots of medications every single day. In the morning, I would take 8 to 10. At night, I would take 8 to 10. And I was also doing bloodshot injections into my stomach. So I would always have to be carrying around a little box full of needles and pills. It was just a lot for a 14-year-old. And thinking back on it, I'm really not sure how I got through that. But I really think my dad had helped me with the process because he was a pharmacist and he was trying to tell me and explain the importance of taking medications every day. Because when you don't understand your condition, it's very hard to adhere to your medication regimen. So I went from being a fly on the wall to being in the spotlight, and I really didn't know how to handle that. But I didn't want people to only notice me just because I almost died. With all that being said, I had a hard time understanding my condition, and I really think it would have helped to have someone that I knew around my age that was going through something similar, or any sort of support group or mental health support, because I don't really remember having that when I was younger. And if I was asked about whether or not I needed help, I probably wouldn't say that I needed help because I didn't understand my condition and I didn't realize it was going to be a lifelong thing I was dealing with. So the coping process for me was nothing. I didn't cope with my situation. I didn't cope with my condition. I kind of just lived with it, and I never really came to terms that this was my life. So I'll go into more of what my life looked like years down the road. So you obviously can tell my life changed quite a bit. I went from no medications, healthy, no doctor's appointments, to millions of doctor's appointments, tons of medications, and just a change in lifestyle. So the next video, I'm going to talk more about my open heart surgery that I had 2 years ago and what the recovery looked like for that. So I hope you tune in.